There are countless visual art projects available online and in books. How do you evaluate which ones are best? How do you take a project you find and improve upon it? Let's take a look. This is a project from an online source and would typically be used around the winter holiday season. In this project, students use black paper and draw a white rectangle. In the center of this white rectangle, they draw a triangle and fill it with 5 layers of line texture to represent a Christmas tree. They then build layers of pastels, adding a variety of colors to create more complex colors, tints, and shades. Lights and a star are added, and finally 3 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines are added to represent a window. We're looking at this Christmas tree from outside a house on a snowy day. From your perspective, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this project? Pause the video to think and discuss this idea. Don't think yet about modifying this project, just identify the strengths and weaknesses that you notice. You probably identified several strengths to this project. Among them, students are learning to work with pastels and a ruler to make parallel lines. They're learning to blend colors and considering how tints, shades, and complex colors can be made from more than one pastel. For example, how is green modified when I layer yellow or blue or white on top of it? They're also learning to follow directions. This last strength may also be identified as a weakness, as this project is balanced heavily towards structure over creativity. This is a common issue with art projects. When the priority is following directions to create an aesthetically pleasing image, this is referred to as a project that values product over process, concept, or creativity. In elementary art education, experts agree that product should be de-emphasized and process should be our goal. The goal of this project seems to be to follow directions and to imitate someone else's image. This project doesn't appear to prioritize the perspectives, ideas, culture, or thoughts of the children artists. Several issues arise with projects like this. First, students start to believe that art making is only a direction-following process instead of using skills to help us envision ideas, refine those ideas, problem solve to get those ideas onto the canvas, and evaluate and improve upon their original creations. You can recognize direction-following projects of this type when they're displayed, as they all look essentially the same. Secondly, when dozens of artworks are displayed that are virtually identical, it's easy to point out the so-called best one in the group due to aesthetic values like neatness and technical skills, rather than concepts or original thinking. This can lead many creative students to believe they're not good at art because they aren't proficiently imitating the example artwork. To be clear, imitating someone else's efforts is an essential developmental phase. Most everything we learn by imitating. But, for example, do we become masters of writing only by copying other people's words? Don't the masters of any art form combine learned skills with original conceptual thinking? The question becomes, when can we introduce this conceptual thinking to the acquisition of skills? How do we balance the structure of direction following with the creativity of original thought. You may have also identified that a project that has students making a Christmas tree in a cozy house as viewed from a snowy exterior may not match the reality of many students. They may not live where it snows, they may not have a cozy house, and they may not celebrate Christmas. It's not a culturally appropriate project for all students. So how can we improve upon this project? How can we retain the best conceptual components of this project and also develop creativity skills in our young artists? Let's consider the creative problem that we're asking students to solve. In the original project, there wasn't much of a creative problem at all, as this was essentially a direction following assignment. What creative problem could this project become? For example, could students be asked to illustrate a winter day? Could they create an artwork that represents how family feels to them? Pause the video now and consider this question and share with those around you. You probably had many ideas. Here are a few more. Could this project illustrate a writing prompt, such as, tell a story about a holiday that you remember. What happened? Alternatively, what would be a view through a window in your life? Once you have a creative problem for students to solve, how can we strengthen this project even further? One possible solution is to turn to the 8 creativity skills, and several of those 8 seem appropriate to consider here. Creative problems are not easy to solve, and students will need to envision, that is, to imagine multiple possibilities. They may also need to reflect, to think and discuss these ideas. Students may not be used to this kind of work, and just like with creative writing, the teacher and the class have to support the ideation process. Industry leaders say that one of the top qualities that they look for in employees is the ability to think creatively, to think of multiple solutions to a problem. If you have students write about a memory, such as tell a story about a holiday that you remember, you're integrating, you're making connections between their memories, their writing, and their visual art. As you develop sensory details in their writing with prompts like, in your memory, what do you remember smelling, hearing, seeing, tasting, and feeling? Was it warm or cold? What were you wearing? You're also helping them to envision their visual art. You may recall that a strength of the original project was developing the pastel blending and the ruler skills. This is a part of Develop Craft, where we learn the skills and tools of the art form. Perhaps a practice project or skills lab approach could be used to teach some of these skills and tools. This is where something like the tree in the window lesson could be useful as a means to an end, but not the end itself. Finally, how do we develop an iterative approach to creativity? How do we, as educators, normalize assessing the creation and improving upon it? One way is to make the assignment have multiples embedded into the assignment. For example, create 2 views of a holiday you remember. What are those 2 views? Yours and someone else's? Before and after an event? What makes sense for your memory? Another way is to use a small group discussion process. The artist sits with 2 others and presents their artwork. The other 2 say what they notice and what they wonder about the artwork. Afterwards, the artist thanks the viewers and says what they want to work on in their next version. They then create that second version. This mindset of multiple iterations is common in creative industry, but a challenge in school settings where one and done is frequently the approach to work. Finally, while not a part of the creativity skills, the display of student art conveys much about the approach to art on the part of the learner. If only the artworks themselves are displayed, the focus returns to the product. How aesthetically pleasing are the artworks? If we display the creative problem, process photos, the artworks, and the student writing about their thinking, we convey that art making is much more than simply direction following. We are making their learning visible. We are highlighting ideation, making connections, problem solving, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. Ideally, the reaction of the viewer to the art is, wow, these students really thought about a lot. They're real problem solvers. In other words, we can communicate that art making is learning for today and the future.